of whatever evidence is unearthed from.
What is up to the transparency? This is my new intro for the Karen Reed case that I introduced it here tonight.
Whatever source, because for 15 months, every stitch of evidence has been consistent with my client's innocence.
What is up, Jackie? Welcome to membership. Woo-wee!
In the meantime, my client suffers. In the meantime, her life is on hold, while she spends every waking moment defending herself, emotionally, intellectually, and financially. We cannot abide by excuses any longer. We need this court's help. We need you, Your Honor, respectfully.
Juror, quote, believes that every member of the jury, if asked, will confirm that the jury reached not guilty verdicts.
Well, I don't know what's going on over there, but here we go. You guys are going to expect to hear about this. This is the Idaho 4 drop. Ann Taylor making moves. She says, 16th. See that? 16th supplemental request for discovery. Brand new. Ann Taylor needs more. The prosecution only has until September to get all the discovery in before it's the deadline. Just so you guys know. But Ann Taylor right here, Ann Taylor is asking for her 16th supplemental request for discovery. Let me tell you guys something. In the Dr. Drake, Dr. Moore case, do you know how many times Dr. Moore's attorney asked for supplemental discovery requests? 0. 0 times. But guess what Dr. Moore got? Dr. Moore at least got a preliminary hearing. And that's what we're here. These are the transcripts in the preliminary hearing. So I'm going to focus on this. You guys are going to focus on that. Here we go. Dr. Drake, Dr. Moore. This is chiropractor versus chiropractor. Allegedly, Dr. Moore killed Dr. Drake, not because he wanted to kill Dr. Drake, but because he wanted to shoot a bullet through a window to scare him. But let's just go to the preliminary hearing, shall we? Shall we? Well, this is the criminal complaint right here on file. So they go through that shebang. All right. And this is your burden here. So the state has the burden of showing that it's more likely than not at this proceeding that the defendant is guilty of the charged felony. If the state fails to meet that burden of proof today, the court would dismiss the charges against the defendant. However, that dismissal would be without prejudice. And without prejudice means what? Well, without prejudice means that they could file at a later date. If the state fails to meet that burden of proof today, the court would dismiss the charges against the defendant. However, that dismissal would mean it would be without prejudice, and without prejudice means that the state would be free to refile the charge and proceed to another preliminary hearing in the future. Ms. Bolton, with that explanation, and of course, the far more detailed conversations you've had with Mr. Moore, do you believe he understands the nature and purpose of today's preliminary hearing? Yes, Your Honor, says Bolton. All right, then. Is there anything else scheduled today that we will be taking up other than the preliminary hearing? Bolton says no, Your Honor. Okay, are there any defense motions that you would like to make before I turn the floor over to Mr. Hall, that is Tevis Hall, who is dead? Your Honor, we would move to exclude witnesses. I think the parties have already complied with that, but we did just make that official motion for the record. Additionally, I don't know how the court wants to address it, but I did file a motion 2 days ago to exclude defendants' statements from consideration of this court at this hearing. I don't know how the court wants to address that issue. Well, I have no idea why Jill Bolton would be filing something 2 days prior to the preliminary hearing. Okay. Why she would file something 2 days before that when she has been representing Dr. Moore since and from August 28th, the day I think after he was arrested. Okay. So yeah, about that. So yeah. What do you guys think? I want to do something really quick here. I got people messaging me saying, we didn't even know you were live. I'm like, yeah, it should be telling you guys. Yeah, let me do it like this. Okay, maybe that'll. Is his attorney good? Well, he doesn't have this attorney anymore. So we'll see. Back at it. All right, then. Is there anything else? Where was I? We could proceed with our motion if it would like. We would probably just call a state's witness to authenticate the video. Wait, whoa. Are we sure this is Miss Bolton here? I don't know how the court wants to. Okay. We would probably just call a state's witness to authenticate the video and play those portions that we set forth in our motion. Okay, so still Bolton. She wants to, again, just getting started here. I feel bad letting people get in. Those of you guys that watch on replay, just fast forward to this part. Hey. Welcome, Jackie. There you go. Welcome to the game, Jackie. Welcome, Jackie. Again, these are the transcripts for the Dr. Moore, Dr. Drake case. This is a preliminary hearing. It's probably a pretty good thing to listen to. So catch it on rewind. So basically what Jill Bolton wants to do is she wants to call one of the people that was present in the room where Dan Moore gave his false confession and his coerced confession. So that's what she's saying right here. And she says that would be our proposal, but of course the court makes that call. Thank you. And now, Mr. Hall, what would you like to say? Tevis Hall, what would you like to say? Tevis Hall. Well, we're just getting started here. So Tevis Hall says, Your Honor, I think it is appropriate that we address the motion to suppress issue pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 5.1 dealing with preliminary hearings. It indicates in paragraph B, sub paragraph 4, about halfway down, motions to suppress must be made in the trial court as provided in Rule 12, and this is clearly a Rule 12 motion. The trial court in this reference is the district court. If the court bounds a person over, however, there is the caveat that says, however, if at the preliminary hearing, the evidence shows facts which would ultimately require the suppression of evidence sought to be used against the defendant, the evidence must be excluded and must not be considered by the magistrate determining probable cause. Again, so we're just getting started into the preliminary hearing of Dr. Moore, Dr. Drake. So it becomes a matter of discretion and whether or not the violations actually alleged by counsel or defendant in this case would rise to something that was so clear to the court with regard to suppression. So in in stating that it's the state's preference, if the court is going to hear a motion to suppress, that the court has to view the entire proceeding and not those little excerpts that are just presented by counsel in defendant's brief. And the reason is, for example, there are several other things sometimes, blah, blah, blah. So they go back and forth, and ultimately the judge says, all right, we're going to proceed. So here. Okay, with that, and for the record, the defense motion to exclude witnesses is granted, which would have already done, but we'll just clean that up on the record and say that. So, Mr. Hall, are you ready to call your first witness? Woo! Are you ready to call? Are you ready to call your first witness? After the transparency, what did the Idaho Supreme Court rule on the tossing of the false confession last year? It is out. It is out. That's ruling. But you have to see what they brought here at the preliminary hearing. So let's say that Brian Colbert had a preliminary hearing. All they brought to the preliminary hearing is do you have you guys ready for your first witness? Okay. Ready to call your first witness. Mr. Hall, Tevis Hall, who is dead, says, Your Honor, prior to calling witnesses, we have two pieces of evidence to present to the court, which are stipulated to. Stipulated to. Stipulated to. Now, it's very important to understand two things before I get started. The defense did not get the discovery. They had 33 pages of discovery up until September 26th. On September 26th, they received 2 terabits. Then they had this on October 2nd. How in the world did you go through in 1 week 2 terabits worth and then have to ask for more? But to at least get to the point of all right, how are we going to go about a preliminary hearing that you just gave me? I had 33 pages. 33 pages. And then literally gets a week before the preliminary hearing, 2 terabits on a hard drive. Okay. Preliminary hearing went on. Here we go. Mr. Hall. So the first is a copy of the autopsy report that it was stipulated to. You're going to stipulate to the autopsy. What the fuck are you doing? I wouldn't stipulate to shit. Don't put that shit in. I want to ask you questions about this. Well, that was performed by Sally Akins, who is a medical doctor and a forensic pathologist in Spokane, Washington, as well as attached toxicology report. We would ask that be marked as State's Exhibit 1, Your Honor. So they want to mark the autopsy and the toxicology as 1. Ms. Bolton says, you're making it just 1 exhibit? Why wouldn't that be 2? You know what I mean? It should be 2. He says, yes. She says, okay. Yeah, no objection. She has no objections to those being admitted. Who's going to testify to these? Ms. Bolton says, okay, yeah, no objection. Court says 1 is admitted. Ms. Bolden, to its admission. 1 is admitted. Mr. Hall says, and the second, Your Honor, is the 911 call that Jennifer Drake made to the Boundary County Sheriff's Department. And we would ask that be admitted as State's Exhibit number 2 and then published to the court. And then published. That's how they just wanted to publish it because they were, quote unquote, stipulating to it, right? And then Bolton says, any objection to the proposed exhibit number 2? Bolton says, I'd like some clarification. If we could get that from the state. As we understand it, Jennifer Drake called 911, but she was in Hayden, Idaho at the time. So there were several routings of that call. And so I guess we just like a representation of what it is that they are playing. Mr. Hall says, this is, and then Bolton, it was like a cutoff. We don't have an objection to a 911 call, but we want to make sure that we understand what it is. Oh boy. It's the one that, and she actually is correct, Your Honor. Because she was in Hayden, it went to Cooney County and then got routed up to Boundary County. This is what I put out there. And then in 1 to 2 weeks, Tevis Hall is dead when I did my breaking news with the 911 calls. Because Tevis Hall states that, yeah, but I want, it went to Cooney County because she was in Hayden and then got routed up to Boundary County. So this is the Boundary County call. So it's only the Boundary County portion, the judge says? Yes, Hall says. Well, okay. With that clarification, Ms. Bolton, how do you feel? Thank you. I have no objection. Okay, well then 2 is admitted. Okay. And with that, Your Honor, we would go ahead and call Mike Van Leuven to the stand. Woo! Michael Van Leuven, come on down here, baby. Detective Michael Van Leuven, called as a witness, herein on behalf of the state, being first released sworn. Blah, blah, blah. Court says, please have a seat up here. Direct examination by Tevis Hall. Would you please state your name and spell your name? Great. Where do you work? I work for the Idaho State Police. What do you do for the Idaho State Police? I am Investigations Sergeant for District 1. What are your roles and responsibilities? Gonna zoom in. I manage a team I supervise a team of detectives who primarily, their role is in the investigation of what we refer to as general crimes. The majority of those crimes involve officer-involved shootings or other homicides. Are you a post-certified officer in the state of Idaho? I am. When did you become post-certified? 2001. What certification did you hold with the Idaho State Police at this time? Or, excuse me, the Idaho Peace Officer Standard of Training. The most senior certificate that I hold is a superior certificate. What other certificates are there? There's basic, intermediate, advanced, and master's, and executive, I believe. And do you hold all of those or just, I do not. I hold a basic, intermediate, and advanced. Holy shit. I was promoted before I was on the job for 15 years, so I'm not eligible to receive the senior. Were you involved in the investigation of the death of Brian Drake in Boundary County, Idaho? Yes, I was. How was it that you became involved in that? It's, common for other agencies in District 1 counties and cities who have a serious crime to ask for assistance of the State Police Investigations Division. In this case, I was notified on March 12th by my lieutenant that there had been a shooting, a homicide had occurred in Boundary County, and that the city of Bonners Ferry was requesting our assistance in processing the scene. Kind of like in the Idaho 4 case when they wanted to bring out, just like, you guys are going to like process the scene. The Idaho State, you're supposed to come out and process the scene, right? Think about that. After you had received that information, did you make a trip to Boundary County? I did. I made calls that evening, and then the next morning, myself and my team responded to Bonners Ferry, Boundary County, Idaho. Where did you go? We went to an office building located at 6811 Main Street, Bonners Ferry. Okay. Miss Bolton says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. It looks like the officer is reading from something in his testimony instead of testifying from his personal knowledge, and we'd ask him to testify from his personal knowledge. Mr. Hall, I have no objection to that. That's what the rules say. Were you able to remember that, or did you refer to a report? Ms. Bolton says, could his notes be taken away from him so that he stops referring to them, please? I'll just ask him to turn his notes over and ask permission if he needs to refresh his recollection, and then we'll deal with that in a case-by-case basis. Did you write a report in this case, Tevis Hall says? I did. And in that report, did you put the address of where you went? I did. Do you remember that address independently, or would you have to refer to your report to refresh your recollection? I just looked at my report and refreshed my memory, my recollection. So I know that it was 6811 Main Street, Bonners Ferry. And describe what you saw when you got there. There was a single-story office building oriented as an angle as to where one corner was facing north, immediately to the southwest of the building. When I got there, I was advised by local law enforcement that who were on scene, that Miss Bolton, objection, hearsay. Your Honor, it's not offered for the truth of the matter assertive, just to show what he did next. Overruled. Thank you. Go ahead. I was advised by local law enforcement that a doctor named Brian Drake had been shot and killed the night before in his office. I observed that there was a sign advertising him. His name is a chiropractor on the sign. And that he'd been shot through a window. That was in that alleyway between his office building and the coffee shop. I observed a hole through a double pane window, as well as through a metal mini blind. That was my initial observation of the scene. What further observations during that time did you make with regard to the window itself? Size, the color of the blinds, anything with regard with were they open, closed, those types of things? Yeah. The window was approximately 2.5 feet, and probably 3 to 4 feet tall. The bottom of the window was approximately 40 inches off the ground. The hole, and you could see the trajectory of the hole based on both windows having a hole through them, as well as the mini blind. Those were all spaced out in sequence about this far between the pane of the window and the mini blind. And you could see a downward trajectory where the bullet went from the outside in, and could see that from ... Your Honor, I object. This is speculation. There's not foundation for this testimony about the trajectory. Mr. Hall, your response? I can lay some further foundation, Your Honor. You guys, this is where it gets fucking amazing. These were good objections right here by Joel Bolton. So, Your Honor. Objection sustained. Your Honor. You had mentioned the trajectory of the bullet. Yes. What factors did you take into consider to determine trajectory? I observed the damage to the windows, plural, as well as the damage to the metal mini blind, as well as the shards of glass that were visible inside the office space. Could you tell whether or not the bullets traveling through those items that you've referenced, what direction of travel they were? Were they from the outside in or the inside out? Yes, it was from the outside in. Okay, how did you determine that, motherfucker? What are you talking about? This is wild. Could you determine if they were from the outside? How? Objection. Again, speculation. How did you determine that? There's no objection there though, because she didn't do her homework. Yes, it was from the outside in. Okay, and what objective factors did you look at to determine that? Oh, we observed the shards of glass that were predominantly on the inside of the room. Are you fucking kidding me? There was no fucking shards on the inside of the room. The fuck, Jill? You didn't show him a goddamn piece of paper that said, here's the fucking window. Show me what shards you're fucking talking about. I am fucking pissed. Well, we observed the shards of the glass. They were predominantly on the inside of the room. Most particularly was the hole in the metal mini blinds, which shows a circular defect with metal that is bent inward into the room. How do those blinds go on? You just go like this, right? Joop, 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 joop. Okay, just making sure. They don't show any pictures, you guys. Do you understand that? There are no exhibits shown. There are no exhibits shown to say that this is what he looked at. He is just testifying. No exhibit shown. Okay. Were those all at the same height? Were the glass from the outside the second pane and no? He says no. Which one was higher or lower? The outer pane of glass showed the highest defect. The innermost part, the metal mini blinds, showed the lowest defect. When you say the highest defect and lowest defect, are you referring to the height or yes? Yep. Okay. The height of the ground of the holes. What? Wait a second. The height of the ground of the holes? The height of the ground of the holes is determining what? If it came from inside or outside? Are you fucking kidding me? No, that is not true. Because if it was a upward trajectory, then what, motherfucker? Then what does that mean? Oh, then it came from inside out. Isn't that true? Based on your logic right here. So if I understand correctly, then the bullet would have traveled through the window first and then came out of the blinds? Miss Bolton, objection leading. Overruled. That's correct. And is that the trajectory that you determined? It is. Oh, so I just nailed you on your whole geometry bullshit. Fuck out of here. It is. Your Honor, I'm going to object again to foundation. There's been no testimony at all that he's had any training or experience on determining trajectory. Joe Bolton gets a clap for that one. Mr. Hall, I'll ask some additional foundational questions, Your Honor. Proceed. How many homicide scenes have you investigated? That's hard for me to put a number on precisely, but it's got to be close to between 50 and 100 homicides. Who the fuck is dying over there in Idaho? Homicides in Idaho? 50 to 100 he's done? I want some numbers on that. I think that's a lot. What are you talking? Give me some names. Give me some cases. Give me some cases where Van Leuven did 50 to 100 homicide scenes. Whoever actually can bring me the true accurate number of that, like, I want to send you out a gift card courtesy of Van Leuven. There's no fucking way. And have you gone to any training with regarding to investigations of crime scenes regarding homicides? Yeah, I have. What training have you gone to? Well, I received training in the academy in 2001, motherfucker. Shit, shut up, man, right here. 2001 in the academy. Yeah, that's when he was in the academy, as well as the advanced academy regarding responding to the crime scene. Since the academy, I've attended between 1,500 and 2,000 hours of advanced training, including multiple week-long trainings in regarding to homicide scenes, both evidence collection and homicide investigations theory. Well, you might need to go back there on that theory thing, buddy. Fuck out of here. His theory is that natural gas suicide attempt theory. Fucking stellar. Pissed. How long have you been using firearms yourself? What? Is that really? Personally, since I was a kid, about 10 years old, I think I got my first 22. Obviously, I've used the firearm ever since I was employed by the state police. And how old are you? I'm 44. So about 34 years you've been using firearms? Yes, sir. All right. That's what laid the foundation. Get the fuck out of here. Shut up. Shut up right now. So is that the trajectory that you determined based upon your training and experience? Oh, fuck no. Yes, sir. Your Honor, same objection. There's still been no testimony about trajectory training. We've heard nothing. Overruled. 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 You guys, overruled. Overruled. That was good enough for this judge that he has been shooting a gun since he's been fucking 12. It's good enough here. This is how they lay foundation in Idaho. The fuck out. Okay. The court says overruled. This is actually a matter that an average person could understand upon observation. Hell to the no. Then he says, I can't even believe this. This is going to help. This is going to help Dan more like you wouldn't believe if his lawyers use it. That this is actually a matter that an average person could understand upon trajectory. Well, then how come the medical examiner has a different trajectory than this fucking idiot? How high was the bullet hole on the outside pane of the window from the bottom of the window? Not from the ground, but from the bottom of the window. I can't tell you the exact height off of the top of my head. That was measured both through the use of a laser measuring instrument as well as my own rough use of a tape measure, which is documented by photographs. How many homicides did Van Leuven do between 2001 and 2020? So 2023 is way outside the scope here because this is a homicide that was in 2020. Listen to this. This is hilarious. The general answer is it was a height consistent with an adult person holding a gun and standing outside the window. What the fuck are you talking about? An adult person holding a gun. An adult person holding a gun and standing outside the window. The general answer is, because this was the question, how high was the bullet hole on the outside pane of the window from the bottom of the window? He said they measured it from the outside of the window. They didn't measure it from the outside of the window. There is no measurement outside. No, motherfucker, you did not measure from outside. You only measured from inside. Okay, let's be honest. Are you talking about from the ground? Because like this is like a legit preliminary hearing for murder. Second-degree murder. Okay. And so the question I have though is that from the bottom? Is that from the bottom of the window? How high up from the bottom of the window if you had to measure it? I can't answer that off the top of my head. Okay. It was a few inches. Wait, what? It was a few inches? A few inches is like 2, 3, a few. You would never say that 14 inches is a few inches. If you were taking a 10-inch cock, would you say that's a few inches? I don't think so. You wouldn't. It was a few inches. A few is like 3. A couple is 2, a few is 3. Can't even. How much of the window was exposed that wasn't shot? Was this halfway through the window? You mentioned something that there was 3 to 4 feet high. He didn't mention any feet anywhere at all. Oh, yep. No, it was at the bottom portion of the window. Okay. After you made those observations, did you ultimately go into the office itself? Yes. When you went into the office, what did you see? I saw who I later learned to be Dr. Brian Drake lying on his back on the floor of his office with his head towards the door and his feet back towards the window. That's false. With his phone lying near his head. Did you ultimately extradite his body from the scene? The coroner, Mick Millett, did. No, he didn't. We assisted Mr. Millett in that process. Once you were inside and you observed the position where Brian Drake's body was lying, what can you tell us about your observation from the scene or the blind going forward into the office? So what would have been, was there anything in between the blind and the window? Objection, Your Honor. Compound. What the fuck? This is no objection. How does this question make it in with no objection? Once you were inside and you observed the position where Brian Drake's body was lying, what can you tell us about your observations from the scene or blind or going forward into the office? So what would have been, was there anything in between the blind and the window? That's a question right there. Objection. Unresponsive. Unresponsive by the lawyer. Yeah, the blind, the bottom portion of the blind was propped up on a Kleenex box, a square Kleenex container. No, it wasn't. The bottom portion of the blind was, no, it was not. This is not true. This is not true. Wrong. Absolutely not true. So portions of the bottom portion of the blind there were gaps, so it was visible to see through. There was a stool immediately in front of the window, and based on the trajectory of the bullet through Dr. Drake's body, we later concluded that he had been likely sitting on the stool. What the fuck? This is Tino's What the Fuck Translation Services. What the hell is this sentence? What is this? This is insanity. Dr. Drake's body is on the floor. On the floor. What are you talking about based on the trajectory of what? He wasn't like slumped over on his desk. He's on the floor, way away from the window. I don't understand. I don't understand what's going on here. Wow. This is how he figured it out. This is his amazing work here. This is great. You don't want to use an expert. You don't want to use a crime scene expert. You think that this is going to fly? Was there anything between the stool and the window? Only the mini blind? Okay. There was no desk or table or anything of that nature. Why aren't you showing them pictures? No. Okay. And could you tell based upon the physical evidence there which way Brian Drake would have been facing when he was shot? He would have been facing with his back to the window. Objection, speculation. 100% speculation. No objection there? Did you even look at the fucking pictures, Jill? Brian Drake would have never been sitting with his back to the window. Brian Drake would have been sitting on the side of the desk because there was no room to be behind the desk. Objection, speculation. This calls for speculation. Which way Brian, he would have been facing his back to the window and the front of his body leaning forward into the room. And you are aware that an autopsy was conducted in this case. I am. What up, Joanne? Mary P, Joanne. I am. And that is what has been admitted as State's Exhibit 1. Sure has, yep. Okay. You had indicated that you went there the next morning. So that was these observations made on the 13th of March. That's correct. And were you able to determine the event would have occurred on March 12th? How? Yeah. How were you able to determine that? So you're asking. Thank you. How are you able to determine that? Objection, Your Honor. He is not a fucking ME. He's not a doctor. Look at how are you able? I learned that Dr. Drake had been on the phone with his wife. Look at where Van Leuven takes this. Van Leuven's like, I'm putting it all on this hoe. I'll put it on this hoe. Trust me. Okay. You had indicated that you went there the next morning. So was that these observations made on the 13th? Yes. So his body was laying there for well over 12 hours. Well over 12 hours. Okay. That's correct. And you were able to determine the event would have occurred on March 12th. Yes. How were you able to determine that? I learned. He didn't say the words I heard. I learned that Dr. Drake had been on the phone with his wife. You learned this. You didn't determine this. See how he didn't use the word determined? He learned. He learned this. He didn't determine this. See these words? These words are very, very important. I learned that Dr. Drake had been on the phone with his wife, Jennifer, when he had been shot. Miss Bolton says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is hearsay response. Court says, Mr. Hall. It is a hearsay response, Your Honor. I'll withdraw. I'll withdraw the question. Oh, fuck, thank God, right? You guys, this is hilarious. I just wish the more of the world want to hear it. About what time was it that you... I'll go ahead and withdraw that, Your Honor. Do you... I'm going to ask that Jennifer Drake go outside the courtroom, Your Honor, because I'm going to have to call her just to establish the time for the court. The judge says, just a thought. We've already got Exhibit 2 admitted. Is that not sufficient to address the issues that you're trying to get at? This is where I notify the goddamn defense for Dr. Moore and say, you totally got hosed. And if you would please turn to page 23 of the preliminary hearing and see how bad you were lied to. This is prosecutorial misconduct. Because the judge is over here like, why are you having such a hard time getting to this, like, like what's going on here? Just a thought. We've already got Exhibit 2 admitted. It's the goddamn 911 call. Mr. Hall says, I'm not sure it's, God, I can't remember whether or not it states the time, Your Honor. Where are the fucking CAD notes, bitch? I said, Jill Bolton, did you not see this? Were you just totally not aware of what was going on in front of your face? Or did you believe that your client was guilty? Unfucking believable. Here it is, though. Here's Tevis Hall, who is dead after a week to 2 weeks after I exposed the 911 fuckerage. The court says, I don't have Exhibit 2, although it's admitted. Tevis Hall says, yeah, and it's, I haven't seen it. Mr. Hall says, excuse me, that's Exhibit 1. Yeah, Exhibit 2, Your Honor, it's the 911 call, and I can't remember whether or not it had the time on there. And so, that's the only, when you say the call, is it a recording or is it's a recording or a transcript? It's a recording, Your Honor. It's not a transcript? That's, okay. That's correct. Miss Bolton, your response to Mr. Hall's request to have Miss Drake step out so that she can be called as a witness? Why would you need to do all of this? Miss Bolton says, yeah, I have no objection to that. All right then, Mrs. Drake, would you please remain in the hallway briefly until Mr. Hall calls you as his witness? And during the course of the investigation, did you ultimately have conducted interviews with Dan Moore? Wait, what? Wait a second. What? What? We were talking about a 911 call, and now all of a sudden, and during the course of the investigation, did you ultimately have conduct interviews with Dan Moore? Trying to introduce a 911 call to this. I did. Is he in the courtroom today? He is. Where is he at? What is he wearing? He is sitting at the defendant's table in the middle, wearing a dark blue shirt, dark blue pants, with a light blue mask on his face. How many interviews? How many interviews? How many interviews? I had 2 interviews with him. Thank you so much. I had 2 interviews. Did other officers have interviews with him also? Yes. Okay. Did you have an interview with him on August 27th, 2020? Yes, I did. And who else was present during that interview? Detective Gary Tolson of the state police. Was the defendant also there? Oh, yeah. Sorry. What's up, Boston? We're getting nasty with it. Absolutely. Yeah, was the defendant there? Oh, yeah, I forgot he was there too. Awesome. Was that recorded? Yeah, it was. And have you had an opportunity to review the recording of that interview? How long was your interview approximately with Dr. Moore? My portion of the interview was approximately 15 minutes long. 15 minutes into the interview, he asked for an attorney. That's why his fat fucking ass left, right? At the conclusion of the 15 minutes, what did you do? I stood up and I ended my portion of the interview and stopped the recording and left the room. Why did you leave the room? Mr. Moore had made a statement to the effect that he was going to need or might need a lawyer. I was concerned at that point that he may have been invoking his rights under the Miranda, and I wanted to leave the room to think about that and listen to exactly what he said and examine that to make sure that I was clear in my head as to what his meaning was. Okay. And you had, did you remember the statement that he made in reference to that? And I'm going to have you authenticate is Tevis Hall an idiot? What is this bumbling shit? The videos that are here. So we're going to hear that, but do you remember the statement that he was made? I think I do, but I could refer to my report. I have the quote written exactly. This is fucking crazy. All right, Detective Van Leuven. Would it help refresh your memory? It would. Would you please refer to your report, but do not read it out loud? Ms. Bolden says, Your Honor, I am going to make this objection, and maybe I'll help speed things along. I think the actual recording of the statement is the best evidence, not the officer's attempt to recount it, which I would submit, having reviewed the video many times, and his report is not accurate. Well, fuck, if you did all that, Jill, why the fuck didn't you do other things? Come on. So you see that he's a fucking horsey liar, and you thought that any of his reports were accurate. Now, the court says, the judge says, Mr. Hall, your response to the best evidence objection, it certainly is the best evidence, Your Honor. I'm just using this as a wipeout. Foundation as to why he went out. Ms. Bolden says, we stipulate to the admission, no foundation needed. Mr. Hall, I'll move on then, Your Honor. God, Jesus Christ, Jill, just fucking hand him a goddamn dick on a sucker stick. All right, I'll move on then, Your Honor. All right, then I'm considering the question withdrawn. Did you, you said that you left the room to kind of figure out whether or not he had actually invoked his right to counsel? Yes. I was asking him a question along the lines of, we know you did this. It was a matter of why you did this, because the why is important. And his response was to the effect, well, if that's what you guys think, if that's what you guys are going to do, Ms. Bolden says, Your Honor, again, then I guess I'm going to need a lawyer. Ms. Bolden says, Your Honor, I don't know why we're going down the same path we just lodged at. Sustained. That last objection, it is sustained. The last response is stricken. So after you went outside and you thought about it, did you have an opinion as to whether or not you felt, as an officer, whether or not he had invoked his right to counsel? Now, again, I'm going to pass by this, but I'm going to just show you guys that this is to get everything out. Like, I'm going to object to the relevance of the officer's opinion. That's overruled. It's only being taken to show why he took a subsequent course of action. Okay. Go ahead, please. Yes, I left the room and discussed what he'd said with Detective Tolson, Gary Tolson of the Idaho 4 investigation team, as well as Assistant Chief of the Bonners Ferry Police Department, Marty Ryan. Oh, so Marty Ryan was paying attention and was watching in. I played the recording back of his exact words, and in listening to what he had said, we all agreed that his statements was not a conclusive invocation of Miranda. Okay, at that point or some point later, did another officer go into the interview, the defendant? Yes, Assistant Chief Marty Ryan did. We didn't go back, though. Why didn't you go back, you fat fuck? Because you knew better. Mr. Hall says, Your Honor, at this time, I can bring Marty Ryan up just to go ahead and, say that he conducted an interview. Or if there's a stipulation with the counsel, we can go ahead and just stipulate. I have the 6 segments that are referred to by both myself and counsel, pre-prepared for the court to hear and to be played. Do you want me to? The court says, what exactly is the stipulation you're soliciting? Well, from a foundation, a stipulation from the admission of those sentiments that both she had Do you have those recordings already marked as one of more exhibits? I have not marked them because I have the recordings. I got them on a thumb drive, and we can go ahead and play those. Okay, well, Jill Bolton says, Your Honor, here's what I would suggest, because we're making a record here, and I don't know that a thumb drive is really easy to mark. We've made copies of all of the video recordings, so what I called MV1 36, blah, blah, 37, blah, blah. So these fucking idiots have to deal with the fact that the prosecution is totally not prepared. And I've given them kind of folders that are easily marked and could be admitted. And I've also got the clips that relate to his assertions. What we say are his assertions to write to counsel where we're taking them from. So we stipulate, we'll play them, and the court can always look at evidence under the rules and make a determination as to what is admissible and what isn't, or if there's an objection once they see it. But I think this may be easier than, the flash drive. Just, it's a hard to mark. And court says, Mr. Hall, would you like to proceed in that regard? Well, is it the court's concern that we're making a clear record as to exhibit numbers associated with a particular media that's being played? I understand. And we can go ahead and put them on a DVD, and then we'll mark them States Exhibit 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Well, I think that's what Ms. Bolton is saying. She's already done. And not, Mr. Hall says, she's, and not to sound critical, but why didn't the state already do this? Exactly. Because they never thought that he would be admissible. Why waste our time? Well, because we put them on thumb drives, Your Honor. And thumb drives have been typically used. And then we just go ahead and submit those. Are you going to go ahead, or is counsel suggesting that we go ahead and play the DVDs, or does she want what? I'm suggesting these be marked and then we play these. That way, the record's clear. And I will not, I will not stipulate to the what? Best evidence is you got the entire record and what a bunch of idiots. The court says, okay, let's go ahead and get some exhibit stickers on those. Start with the intemporal sequence, the one that came first. Do you have a way to play those? Yeah, we do. Okay. We have it right here, and we're connected to the video. The deputy clerk says, so you want them A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Your Honor, the only caveat is that the state has not obviously listened to those. We are assuming that those are actual copies of what we provided in discovery. So, and the other portion is there's a stipulation, then we don't need to call Marty Ryan. And Jill says, right. With regard to portion of the interviews, if I understand correctly, right. So that's Jill Bolton. I guess if we could just stipulate that they are the first tape. My God, what the fuck is going on here? Marty Ryan comes on second tape. That is correct. And I know what Marty Ryan looks like, so sure, I don't know exactly what that occurs, Your Honor. And I would also ask that Marty Ryan be allowed to be in the court during the playing of those to make sure that if he notices any discrepancies, that he could draw attention to that. Ms. Bolton, Your Honor, I know that Detective Van Leuven was there watching from the room the whole entire time. He said so in his report anyway, but I don't see the need of having a witness in to look at his own test statements that are recorded. Seems kind of, would Mr. Ryan be needed as a witness beyond what's on the recording? Mr. Hall says, no, Your Honor. Jill Bolton says, yes, he will be needed. Jill Bolton plans on calling him. He will be? Bolton says, for us. For events that occurred that are not captured by the recording, Ms. Bolton? I'm sorry? The court says, you'd be potentially calling him as a witness? Yes. The judge says, for events that are not captured on the recording? Yes. Okay, so if he were only here to view the recording portions, how would that? Why don't you just excuse the fucking asshole? That's fine. Here we go. Your Honor, do you want me to go ahead and put it on the monitor? Perhaps, Judge, while he's doing that, if we could recover those exhibits and we'll play them from here, I think, look at this. Why don't we go ahead and let's go off the record for a brief 5 minutes. Then they get their asses back in check. This is insane. This is about looking at the video because it's on Zoom, or this is on YouTube, rather. Okay. Okay, Mr. Hurt, if there's more comfortable, okay, blah, blah, blah. So, why don't you come in here? You're welcome. Mr. Hall, Your Honor, and we're still on the record, but not live streaming. We're on the record, but not live streaming yet. So just from a presentation standpoint, we would like to interrupt the publication of these DVDs to have Jennifer Drake on the stand. So they go through all of this stuff, getting this all organized to play all this. Then Tevis Hall decides that he needs to interrupt and have Jennifer Drake on the stand so I can go ahead and get the time reference in her statement and then publish first the 911 recording. And the court is that a matter that could be stipulated to in light of all of the documentation we have? Ms. Bolton says, the time she called? Sure. What? The time she called. Are you insane? She says, sure. I said, that is a royal fuck up right there. The time she called? Sure. Yeah. Judge, we don't have any objection to stipulating to the time. To the time she called 911, you have no fucking problem? How? Why would? Right there. Ineffective assistance of counsel. Right there. We don't have any objection to this, to stipulating the time. I know that Miss Drake called her husband, was on the phone with her at approximately the time that he. How do you know that, Jill? Were you there? Are you out of your goddamn mind? Look at this. Have you ever seen a fucking defense attorney do this? I have no idea why the Moores haven't sued the pants off this woman. This is crazy. Miss Bolton says, the time she called? Sure. Yeah, Judge. We don't have any objection to stipulating to the time. I know that Mrs. Drake called her husband. How do you know that? Was on the phone with her, now Brian, a girl, at approximately the time that he was shot. He described it in the call. She described it in the call that's what he told her. So, and that's on the 911 call. It is. Where did you ever hear that 911 call? That 911 call wasn't in evidence, Jill. This 911 call wasn't admitted into evidence until November 1st, 2020. So how did you ever hear that 911 call? Mr. Hall says, so we would ask still for the publication of the 911 call, but we can stipulate to the time. Ms. Bolton says, sure. I don't know that we need to play it. I think the judge can listen to it at any time. Excuse me? Court says, how long of a call is it? Mr. Hall says, it's not ever long, Your Honor. Recording. Let's go ahead and do that. Have you got that marked as a state exhibit? Mr. Hall says, we have it. We put it on a CD, Your Honor. Excellent. 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 We were advised, we understood by court, we could put things on a thumb drive, so I apologize for the confusion. And what's the marking exhibit number on it? Mr. Hall says, Exhibit 2, Your Honor. 3, actually. We've already got a 2, don't we? Or is that 2? That is 2. This 911 call. Are you guys out of your fucking minds right now? Look at this. Court. That is 2. Okay, excellent. Thanks. Did someone say my name? Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. You want it down here? Yes. Court. Okay. I guess we need to go back on live stream as we publish Exhibit 2. We're just getting to the good stuff, Annie. So here we are. Court. Okay. So let's make sure the DVD is cooperating. We're still on the record, but we're not live streaming yet. Mr. Hall says, Your Honor, I think after speaking with Miss Bolton, the preferred method is to go ahead and just call Jennifer Drake. Have her give a short testimony that she's going to give, and then publish the 911 call. The court says, agreed, Miss Bolton? Yes, I have no objection to that. Okay. All right, then. If Investigator Van Leuven would please step down for now, we'll take a break in his testimony, and the state can then call Miss Jennifer Drake. Out of order. Mr. Hall, do we have somebody retrieving Miss Drake? You guys, this is insane. Well, yes, she's here, Your Honor. Oh, if she'd please step forward, would you please face the clerk and raise your right hand? Jennifer Drake called as a witness herein by... She swears under the penalty of perjury. Under the penalty of perjury. Here we go, Jennifer Drake, drum roll. Court says, Please have a seat at the witness stand. And Della, we should initiate the live stream if we haven't already. All right, Miss Drake. The way this works is Mr. Hall will be asking you a series of questions to answer. And when he's finished, then Miss Bolton will have an opportunity to ask you questions as well. Okay. If you don't understand a question, then it's okay to ask to get clarification. And if you just don't know an answer, it's okay to say that as well, okay? Okay. Mr. Hall? Thank you, Your Honor. Direct examination by Tevis Hall, who is dead. Would you please state your name and spell your name? Jennifer Lynn Drake. Where do you live? Are you married? I'm a widow. Who were you married to? Brian Stephen Drake. What did he do for work? He was a chiropractor. Did he have offices in Idaho? Yes. Where were those offices? He had one in Bonners Ferry. He had one in Sandpoint. He had one in Hayden. Did you have a phone conversation with him on March 12, 2020? I did. Where was he? Where was he at when you had this phone conversation with him? Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation. And that's why Tevis Hall says, if you know. He was at his Bonner Ferry office. I would have still said objection, calls for speculation, hearsay. Were you with him? That's why he says, if you know. He was in his Bonner's Ferry office. About what time was that phone call? Well, I called him first at 6:42. He was finishing up with a patient and asked if he could call me back. So we hung up. He called me back at approximately 7:17. We talked for about 9 minutes. And how did that conversation end? Well, it was the first day that COVID was becoming an issue. We were joking about the realization of the fact that our kids' things, Miss Bolton says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is un-motherfucking responsive. Now, that's why I love Joe Bolton, because she don't give a fuck, though, right? She care about her money. And she's going to go ahead and object to this fucking is so unresponsive, man. Okay? Objection. It's non-responsive. Sustained. Could you restate a question, Mr. Hull? I will. What did you talk to him about? I was talking about the children, about the fact that some of their things had been canceled. Okay. And how his day was. And that was due to COVID. Okay. Was that telephone communication with him terminated at any point? Yes. Can you tell me what was said during that time or at the time it was terminated? Near the end, Your Honor, I'm going to object. It calls for hearsay. Overruled. Overruled. Near the end of our conversation, we were just finishing up to say goodbye. And he yelled very loudly, an agonizing yell. And he yelled. I said, what? I said, what's wrong? He yelled again. He said, I think I've been hit. I think someone hit me. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, stuff for a second. He said, I think someone just shot me through my window. That's when I realized my next question was, where did it hit you? Did he respond to that? He said, I think it hit me in the side. That was it. The phone went black. I yelled for him and yelled for him. And it was that moment that I thought, I either need to terminate this phone call and I need to call 911. And that's what I did. When you called 911, Which county were you dispatched to or directed to in that 911 call? It went straight to Coeur d'Alene or Hayden, the Kootenai County. They then transferred me to Bonners County, who then transferred me to Boundary County. And did your husband return? No. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. And how many kids do you have? What the fuck does that matter? Thomas Hall. And how many kids do you have? Jill Bolton. Ms. Bolton says, I'm going to object to the relevance we talked about. Sustained. What is going on? What county were you in? I was in Kootenai County. Well, guess what? Kootenai County says that never fucking happened. Sustained. Ms. Bolton says, we talked about authenticating the 911 call. Sustained. I don't have any further questions, Your Honor. Cross-examination. You know, I don't usually offer to give the prosecutor more time, but I didn't hear a time in the testimony. Did I miss something here? The bitch of Jill Bolton comes out here. Woo! Which is so accurate. Wait, why the fuck do we bring this hoe up here? Jennifer Drake, come on down and testify. You're going to testify to a time. Mr. Hall then says, she said the conversation started at 6:52 or 42. Lasted 9 minutes. Okay. No. And then she had to call back. And okay, I'll ask. Call back at 7:17. Ms. Bolton says, okay. Cross-examination by Jill. So first of all, good morning, Ms. Drake. Morning. She doesn't say good. She just says morning. Morning. Total bitch. Morning. Good morning. And just so you know, the record is being established and you need to speak clearly into the microphone, if you could, so we can all hear you and it can be properly recorded. Okay. Okay. Yes. So I just want to clarify a couple things. You said you were on the phone with your husband and you called at about 6:42 p.m. Is that correct? First of all, the beginning of your questions wouldn't have started there, Jill. The beginning of your questions would have started, Ms. Drake, you mentioned 3 offices that Mr. Drake owns and occupies. You said Hayden, you said Sandpoint, and you said Bonners Ferry. Is that correct? Yes, it is. And how did you determine? How did you know that he was at his Bonners Ferry office? Well, on Thursdays, he sees patients at Bonners Ferry. Okay. So you didn't physically go to Bonners Ferry. You didn't see him there, right? So you have no idea if he would have been there. He could have been. Has your husband ever lied to you? Yes, he has. All the time. But Jill Bolton fucked up. She should have been asking right off the rip, how did you know that he was in Bonners Ferry? Well, because he takes patients on Thursday. But so when he was on the phone with you, though, he didn't say, oh my God, someone just shot me through my Bonners Ferry window, right? He didn't say that, right? Someone just shot me through the window. It could have been the window of his car, right? It could have been the window of his car. No. He said no. Somebody shot me through the window of my office. Get that bitch on that shit. Now, isn't it true, Miss Drake, that your husband shuts off his Life 360 app when he's not around you so that you can't track his ass? But you definitely want to get it in as to how she knew that he was at 6811. Because she wouldn't have. That's all speculative. So he just normally does that, so you just assumed that, okay? So he never told you, hey, I'm at the Bonners Ferry office. You didn't have to double check that. Hey, you're in Bonners Ferry, right? You're in your office? You didn't hey. And you said let's just see what else she says here, but you really want to get down to that, like where he was, like get her to slippy poo up. So that's where I think Jill, first of all, messed up. But I'm not a lawyer, so what the fuck? But I'm telling you that's right. I just want to clarify. Okay. Then she says, yes. And when you called, how was it you know that it was at 6:42? Because I have a record on my phone of exactly when was called. So your phone recorded the outgoing call to your husband, you said, at 6:42. And he couldn't talk to you at that point, right? Right. He was with patients, allegedly. That's what he told you. Right. And that was because he had some patients there, right? Yes. Okay. And then you guys have Life 360 app, don't you? Did you check the Life 360 app after this bang bang? You were always checking Life 360 app. Absolutely not. I do not want to be a lawyer. So, and what was that? Because okay, and then he called you back. You said at 7:17 p.m. Yes, ma'am. All right, and you know that again because it was recorded on your cell phone. What time he called you back? Yes. And here I thought, like, yeah, Jill's gonna get it. Jill's gonna get it. Jill's gonna get it. She's gonna pop it here. She knows what she's doing. All right. And you know that again because it was recorded on your cell phone what time he called you back, right? Yes. Okay. And you talked to him from the time he called at 7:17 for 9 minutes. Is that correct? Is that your testimony? 9 minutes and 15 seconds to be exact. Okay. Okay. And that was also recorded on your phone, the record of that call. Yes. And when you spoke to him on the phone, you told us several things he said. That he said, I think I've been hit. I think someone hit me. I think someone just shot me through the window. Is that correct? Yes. Did he tell you who it was? No. Did he give you any idea who it was that shot him from that call? He only said the words that I just repeated. Okay. Your Honor, I think for the purposes of just the authentication of that 911 tape, which she was called for, we have no further questions today. What the fuck, Jill? What in the absolute fuck? Have you lost your mind? You would have continued to say, did you use that cell phone that you were on the phone with him with? Is that the phone you used to call 911? Where were you when you called 911? Where were you? Where were you? Was anyone home with you? You didn't have a landline. You were home. And did you hang up and call right away? 911? How long did you wait? What'd you do? I hung up and I called right away. You were interviewed by the police in connection with this case, right? Mm-hmm. And when you met with the police, did you talk to Detective Van Leuven? I sure did. You would actually text message with him, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. And you told Detective Van Leuven that there was no record of your 911 call. Isn't that correct when you met with him? And then Detective Gary Tolson asked you, well, are you sure that you didn't call from your landline? And you said that you didn't have a landline. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. So your phone doesn't have a record of calling 911, right? Mm-mm. And you're sure you called with that cell phone? Mm-hmm. And you said that after you called 911 that you tried to call Brian back again, but he didn't answer. What time was that at? I don't know. Does 7:32 ring a bell in 40 seconds? That sounds about right. Do you know how long the duration of your 911 call was, Strake? Total? No, I don't have no idea. What if I told you it was 4 minutes? So 7:29, 7. If you started calling 911 at 7:29 and it was 4 minutes, when would that end? 7:33. Okay. If you called at 7:31, when would that end? 7:31, 4 minutes, 7:35. How is it that you could be on the phone with 911 for a 911 call for 4 minutes total, and you call Brian Drake at 7:32 in 40 seconds? Did you tell 911, hang on for a second, pause, let me go ahead and call Brian now on my cell phone? Did you press hold, then you called, and then you hung up, and then you went back to the 911 dispatch? But when you were sitting in the office with those investigators, Detective Van Leuven, you handed him your phone and you said, look at my 911 call isn't on there, right? And you didn't delete it, did you? No, I didn't delete it. And you called from that number. I called from that number. I called 911 from that number. And you were at your house in Hayden. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was. And then did you get a phone call back from dispatch or from 911 when you called? You got patched through, right? I got patched through. Did they ever call you back? Did you tell the detectives that they called you back? Yeah, they did. They called me back at 7:44. They called me back. Okay. Do you recall what you told the detectives when you got that call back at 7:44? Do you recall that? I told them that, yeah, they called me back because they said that they let me know, hey, medics are there. They're with him, but they wouldn't tell me if he was alive or dead. And I couldn't get anything out of them like that. And then they asked me a really weird question. They wanted to know what Brian's cell phone numbers were. What? Yeah. The sheriff wanted to know what Brian's cell phone numbers were. And that's when I totally was like, what the heck? If he is able to talk to them and he's okay, he would have, you could ask him his numbers. So did you provide the sheriffs with the dispatch with? Okay. So the medics said that they were with Brian at 7:44. When they called me that they're with him at 7:44. Okay. Perfect. And you provided his cell phone numbers. Okay. And who did you call after that? Who did you call? After 911? Oh, my parents. I called my parents. I called, Stephen Minert. He was with my one son. I texted him too. I called Amber Van Ling. She drove with me up north to go there. Did you call any hospitals? I called hospitals. I called the Bonners Ferry Police Department. I was making a bunch. What time did you leave to go head up north? Who went? Just you and Amber? She come over your house. You go over her house. Get that bitch talking. But Joe Bolton says, okay, well, Your Honor, I think for the purposes of just authenticating of that 911 tape, which she was called for, we have no further questions today. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hall. Any further questions? No, Your Honor. Again, Ms. Drake, where was authenticating anything? Where was this a time that came up? What time did you call? No, there's nothing. So all basically Jill Bolton wants to get on the record is that you knew what time you called places because there was a record of it, basically. Because what she's going to try to get at is that there is no record on your phone, so you don't know when you called 911, right? Okay. So then we get to, all right, then, Ms. Drake, you can step down, and you are certainly free to remain here if you want to hear the rest of this. Thank you. Mr. Hall says, thank you, Your Honor. We would move for the publication of State's Exhibit 2. I will note that the copy of the disc that was given to the clerk was inserted into the computer for publication and didn't read. We had another copy that we inserted, and it does read. Listen, this is how fucked up this is. This is how they're going to do this 911 call. So we entered the first one. It wasn't going to read, so we're going to enter this other one. I don't know if there's a defect in the disc or not, but I would ask that just for the record, for clarification, that the one that did not read be marked as defense exhibit or, State's Exhibit number 2, which it has been, and that the one that is reading currently, that it's marked as State's Exhibit number 2A. Why would we keep in the record a disc that doesn't play, says the judge? This is so fucked up. Because it's already been marked, Your Honor. Why don't we remark one that does play? Would there be any problem with that, with Miss Bolton? No, Your Honor. Okay, let's remark the one that works. How's that? That's fine. If we can mark it afterwards, it may be that by putting the sticker on it, that it may have caused something in the computer. So if we can publish and then mark it, we could even mark it with a Sharpie. Might be the way to do it. Yes, Your Honor. Why don't we do that? We'll mark it as Exhibit 2 by Sharpie rather than sticker. Thank you. Do you want to do that now or after it plays, Your Honor? Well, if you got it in there and it's all set up, let's not mess with something that's working. We'll have the court mark it after it's played. How's that? Thank you, Your Honor. And do we need to do anything from a miking standpoint? Thank you. Proceed play. Video plays. Miss Bolton. Your Honor, objection. This is not the video. This is not the audio. Okay. We object. We object and ask that it be stopped immediately. Ms. Gelga, we're trying to. Just a second. Court. Mr. Hall, what just happened? Mr. Hartman's part of the defense. Your Honor, if it's the same file you sent us, I believe Miss Drake's call comes in about several minutes into the 6-minute clip. Where is this 6-minute? I want this 6-minute clip. The fuck? Mr. Hall. So we're going to have to break out. Okay, that. How many minutes before we get to the relevant part? We provided that to them on 9/25. No, you didn't. How? Separately on a hard drive or on a thumb drive? Oh, is it on a thumb drive? Is it somewhere on a thumb drive? Mr. Hall, no, I understand that. Okay. We're talking about Jennifer Drake's. Do you have an objection? Let's go ahead and That irrelevant, whatever that was, that just came in as stricken. Mr. Hall, I understand. It's not relevant. Let's take a 5-minute recess and hopefully cue this thing up to the point where it's the relevant portion of the recording. We'll go off the record. You guys, have you ever seen so much fuckerage to play a 911 call? They're off the record. They're back on it for 5 minutes. We'll go back on the record. Mr. Hall, are we queued up to play now? We're not. And so we're going to move to keep things moving along with the videos of the August 27th, 2020 interview. Your Honor. All right, then. So we're starting with Exhibit A. If that's what the first. Are you out of your fucking mind? See, they refused to play this call. Why? Then, okay. So, the court. All right, then I believe that Detective Van Leuven was still on the stand, and then we called Mrs. Drake out of order, and then we went into playing the exhibits. And I do not believe that. Well, one, I don't know if we're finished with Detective Van Leuven's direct examination, let alone cross. Mr. Hall says, Your Honor, I don't have any further direct exam. We have the authentication of the videos. Those videos have been played. We certainly understand that the defense is going to raise the motion to suppress. So all they showed in the preliminary hearing was 8 clips of the interrogation of Dr. Moore. Okay? After he had invoked his right to counsel. Nothing else. That's it. Nothing else. So he says, I have nothing, but if she has questions for cross-examination for detective, then he needs to be placed back on the stand. Oh, I do, Judge. Okay. All right, then. Detective Van Leuven, you're still under oath. Please resume the stand. May I begin, Your Honor? Please. Okay, good afternoon, Detective Van Leuven. Good afternoon. Let's see how Jill crossed him up. Do you go by detective or detective sergeant or what? What's the best name for you to use? Sergeant, probably. All right, sergeant. Okay, so sergeant, you became a sergeant again in what year? I think it was December. It was in 2015. Okay, you're not sure? I'm not sure. All right. You have some other education or training besides law enforcement? I attended the University of Idaho, where I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree, and then I attended law school for a year and a half. What was your Bachelor's of Science in? I had a dual major in political science and criminal justice. Okay. And you started law school directly after your bachelor's degree? I served briefly in the Navy, but it's a long story. But I had a very brief stint in the Navy before going to law school. Did you leave early from the Navy, or what happened? I had, you want the full story? Well, I guess if you could say it briefly, but if it takes an explanation, that's what it is. That's what it takes. Sure. I'd planned to go to work for the FBI. Shut the fuck up. Well, sure. I had planned to go work for the FBI straight out of high school, straight out of college. Gonna make this up. Detective Van Leuven says, I had planned to go work for the FBI, and but part of me always had been interested in flying. I worked as a summer intern for Larry Craig back in Washington, D.C. when I was in college, and he had a liaison, it's a joke, that worked out of that office who was a Navy commander. She and I became friends. One day I expressed an interest in flying for the Navy, and she told me I was not aware of this, that the Navy was in need of pilots. The Navy's in need of pilots. And if I could qualify, then they could probably get me into an officer candidate program to be a pilot. At the same time, I had been applying for law school, and my law school choice was the University of Idaho, but I had not been admitted. And so the Navy, after testing, indeed gave me a contract to be a pilot. I went to officer candidate school with the understanding that I was going to have to serve 7 years in the Navy. After getting there, after a month or so of OCS, two things happened at the same time. One is we had people from our designators come and meet with us to discuss the process after OCS, and I learned that my commitment was going to be more like 13 years, not 7 years, because I had to wait for slots in school to become open. Ms. Bolton says, so you decided you didn't want to make that long of a commitment? I didn't. But the same week that happened, I got a call. I had been late accepted to the law school. And if I could be there by the following Monday, I could enroll in law school. This is Officer Van Leuven, Detective Van Leuven. So I dropped on request from OSC and went to law school. If you have to wait for slots, they don't need pilots. This is Van Leuven being questioned. Okay. So what did you enroll in law school? I'm sorry. When did you enroll in law school? I think it would have been in 99. Again, just guessing about that, but okay. Yeah. To my best of my recollection, it would have been 99. Okay. And then did you graduate from law school? I did not. Why not? I really did not law. I really did not law. Did not like law school. And I was not getting good grades in law school. And it just was not for me. No shit, man. I love it. I knew there's no way you'd get good grades in law school. And at the same time, there had been a career fair. So you decide you didn't want to be a pilot because of the commitment. Then you hustle down there, you go to law school, okay? Then you realize you didn't like law after you took 4 years of poli-sci, okay? And then what was that? Then you realize that you're going to go to a career fair, okay? And do what exactly? Well, where ISP was hiring, and I decided to give ISP a whirl. I decided to give ISP a whirl, thinking that I could work for ISP for a few years and then go work for the FBI. All right. Interesting. I gotcha. I like it. I'm digging it. Digging it. So were you failing law school? Oh, objection, relevant, Your Honor. Sustained. So let's just ask you this. You attended Post and you get all kinds of training at Post. You talked a little bit about that when the prosecutor was talking to you, right? Yep. And of course, one of the areas of training is Miranda, right? Indeed. And custodial interrogations, right? Sure. And you learned during your training and experience there at the Post Academy that when you have a person in custody, that you must advise them of their Miranda rights, right? No, not necessarily. You didn't learn that? I did not. I did not. You didn't? You learned that when you didn't learn that when you are interrogating somebody, that you have to read them their Miranda rights when they are in custodial interrogations? Right. Well, the situation was exactly what you told him, wasn't it? It was that what? It was if he didn't explain he was going to be booked on first-degree murder, right? I could not put myself in his mind to understand his intent. I only knew what I knew. Right. Sorry, I missed a page. Whoopsies. Well, you have to advise them of their rights. Whether you read them or not is sort of up to you. I've always found that reading is a better policy because you don't forget things. Right. And we see on the video there at about the 3-minute into the interrogation, Dr. Moore, you pull out your card, right? Mm-hmm. Your Miranda card, right? Yeah. You carry that around your wallet, right? In my ID, yeah. Oh, great. So you could be sure to reference that and read it and not miss anything, right? That's just my practice that was advised to me in training a long time ago, that the best practice is just to read the Miranda from a card. So that's what I've always done. So you don't forget what you need to advise them of, right? Okay, right. Okay, and so that's what you did, right? I did. And you continue to ask him questions. I did. It's my understanding that in Miranda, if you intend to arrest them, right. I could not put myself in his mind to understand his intent. I only knew what I knew. Right. And you told him that if you didn't explain why he did this, he would be booked on first-degree murder, right? Mr. Hall says, Your Honor, I'm going to object that we have the tape and evidence or the recording, blah, blah, blah. It's best evidence, blah, blah, blah. So they go to that. Okay. Yep. Your Honor, I'm going after the issue of custodial interrogation. That's something that we can establish through the witness. Well, although I don't think this question bears the point, I'm going to sustain the objection because I basically sustained your objection on the same issue. Sure. So let's get to the good shit. So now we see on the video, and this is where we can maybe get some explanation that whenever anyone enters the room, there's a beeping noise, right? Yep. And that's because there is a code you have to enter to get into the door, right? Yep. Right? Because the door is locked. It's locked from the outside, not the inside. Okay, so was it your position that the time that Dr. Moore came in? Well, let me just back up. When Dr. Moore came in, was he asked to remove any articles of clothing? Not that I recall. Wasn't he asked to remove his belt before he came in to see you? I am not aware of that. He may have been. When he first came in, the detectives met. I was already involved with another witness, another interview, Coroner Millette at the time, so I did not know and see what was going on. I did not greet Dr. Moore when he came in. Okay, so, and he was there, and you gave him his rights, and you proceeded, and we see on the video to ask him about the crime, right? Yes. And when you're asking him about the crime, I'm just kind of laying foundation, Judge. I'm not meaning to recount. Obviously, the video explains things. So Dr. Moore makes statements to you, right? About counsel. And we saw in the recording that it was, and I just want to explain to the court how you understood what happened. So we see on the video what exactly happens. He is, you accuse him of first-degree murder, and he says, well, I guess if you're going to do that, I need to speak to an attorney, right? Pretty close. Okay. And so at that point, we see on the video where you close your book and sigh heavily, right? If you say so. Did you not just watch? Your Honor, Mr. Hall says. The same video. It speaks for itself. So this part I'm going to skip so I can go talk about the actual evidence that they fucking say that they have. Okay. Now, my question is, I'm asking you for why did you do what you did? Not what you discussed, but why did you do what you did? Well, I was trying to explain why I did what I did as though I thought Marty Ryan might have a better rapport with Dr. Moore than I did. Okay, so Marty Ryan went in and you were there when Marty Ryan began questioning him and you watched the remainder of the interrogation, right? I did not. No, that's a fucking lie. Wait a second. Okay, just let's back up. You are the lead investigator in this case. Objection, Your Honor. This is argumentative as to why he didn't. He stated he was not there. Well, I'm trying to get at that. The purpose for why he wasn't there isn't relevant to these proceedings. Court overruled. I'll allow it. Awesome. Thank you. You are the lead investigator in a murder investigation, correct? Indeed. You'd been working this case since March 12th when Dr. Drake was killed, right? Yes. You took over as lead investigator. So as lead investigator, you organized what everybody was doing, or at least had some direction to everybody on where to send the reports and what to do next, right? Yeah. Is that a yes? Yes. So you're saying that while you're interrogating a prime suspect in a murder investigation, you left and didn't watch? Mr. Hall, objection relevance. Can I answer the question? Says Van Leuven. Yeah, now we know what type of man Van Leuven is. Overruled. Can I answer the question? Please do. Please do. First of all, I went in the room where the camera was a couple of times, but then I left that room because I didn't like the door opening. I went down the hall. The fuck? I went down the hall and sat in the other room with some other investigators, and I listened to the audio portion. As good of quality as it was, I listened to most of it, but at the same time that was happening, I was also trying to coordinate with all the different search warrants that were happening, and I was on the phone a lot. So I was answering questions that were being asked of me at the same time trying to monitor the interview as it was going on. And there were other detectives, Leslie Lehman particularly, that I recall, that was listening to it and was sort of updating me as things were happening. What? I think he just walked himself into a heaping hot mess of shit. Leslie Lehman was down at the house. So that'll be interesting. All right, let's just clarify a few points. When were you in the room and Dr. Moore said, well, again, we're going to just phrase it, but I don't even want to hear this anymore. I want to go to the evidence. All right, here we go. Okay. And you made reference to, okay. So during the time period that Marty Ryan was speaking to him, you were distracted and you might have heard some of it because you were listening in by audio, right? Is that right? Okay. You mentioned several times in your interrogation of him, certain things that you said you could prove. You and I think at one point you said you're sunk. So I want to get to the bottom of what you actually understood you could prove at that point. This is the evidence. You made the reference to Dr. Moore, surveillance videos. Yes, correct. And in the videos, you actually referenced that you had that. Well, actually, you referenced first, and I think it was Tolson that referenced that you have. Do you know what how we can track you? And made reference to his cell phone and his truck, right? And if you could say or no for the record. Yes. Okay. And you made reference to geofencing, right? I don't know if I did or Gary did. Someone did, though, right? Someone did. Okay. And so you gave Dr. Moore the impression, or were trying to give him the impression, that you had all this evidence placing him in these exact locations at these exact times, didn't you? Tevis Hall, who's dead? Your Honor, I'm going to object to the line of questioning. None of that had been introduced into evidence. If we want to, but it has. It's on the video. I'm having him explain it. May I please speak? Sure. The objection is for me to speak and then you to respond. I'm sure the judge will guide us. They get into a little tiff. Tevis Hall says, Your Honor, if we presented evidence of that information during the course of this hearing, the actual geofencing or the collection of cell phones or the Bluetooth that reference with regard to the card, that's fair game. Officers can represent to defendants things that they don't have for, because it's obvious they're to get the defendant to talk. And so we're not here to have a discovery inquest, which would allow the defense counsel to go into all of these things that they may have made representations to that may or may not be true. Not what we have a recording of what was said. That's the court gets looked at. Ms. Bowen, Your Honor, here's what I said. Yes. How I would respond. So we have a record of a videotape where the police may be, providing false information to a defendant to try and get him to confess. That is a common tactic. What we're doing is making the record clear as to what their actual evidence was. Because right now, as the prosecutor said when we started, if we get his confession in, we're not going to go into the surveillance videos. We're not going to try to go anywhere into that. So we need to establish that the evidence is not part of something they can actually prove. It is not probable cause to support the charges in the case. And so I think it's on the record and we should explore it. I think she did a horrible job explaining this, to say that it's in the probable cause affidavit for the arrest of my fucking client. Okay? So what the fuck this all says, that's not how you have done that. I'm going to allow it. The evidence of the video does open the door, but as far as going into it in detail, I would reserve the right to cut that off. I think the proper line of inquiry was that legit or was it a bluff? Sure. And when we get an answer to that, we move on. Sure. Well, let me just say it this way. You referenced tracking him in all these locations, right? I didn't. You had let me say this way. Maybe I can explain it better. You pulled out a paper, right? Yes. And the paper you kind of pointed to, and we showed you here. And then you said we showed you there, and you said something along those lines, right? Yes. And you did that to try to persuade Dr. Moore that you had evidence to convict him, right? Yes. And you actually did not have evidence that placed him specifically at those locations and at those times that you said, right? No, that's not right. Okay, well, let's go through this then. So, Your Honor, here is the juncture that the court is referenced. The court said that you'll let him go ahead and answer to find out whether Mrs. Bolt. Actually, they don't have it, and he knows he doesn't have it. So what the problem is is this is a whole bunch of speculation in the surveillance video, that they pieced together. There's portions missing. There's timestamps that are off by 3 hours. They have not authenticated that evidence. So he said, oh yeah, it's all right. I get to go into authentication and let's see how that's right. All right. My ruling on this is going to be, since the state is not presenting this at this point as actual evidence, placing the defendant at the scene, that basically, as far as I'm concerned, it's a bluff. I'm going to take your word for it for the purposes thus far. Okay. So going into whether or not they could prove it by geo-tracking and fencing at this point wouldn't be relevant. Ms. Bolton says, okay. So you're taking, just so I'm clear, you're taking it that they can't prove it, and we're just, for the sake of argument, okay, it's not part of the state's presentation of evidence at this time. Very good. All right, let me move on to the next thing. There was a point in time during the questioning by the prosecutor in the introduction, before we get into all these videotapes, where you were asked about the window where Dr. Drake was shot, right? This is where Joe Bolton fails. So all they have in right now is this false confession. That's what's in on the preliminary hearing. That's it. That is it. You say you asked specifically about measurements between the bottom of the window and where the bullet hole was, weren't you? Yes. And you said you didn't know for sure what the measurement was. The bullet hole was measured 2 different ways. It was measured in a crude way by me with a tape measure with photographs taken, which I'm sure you've seen. It was also measured electronically with a laser instrument by Coeur d'Alene PD officers that came up and used that. So for the purposes of court, we can absolutely show you, or whoever wants to see, where the bullet hole was, how high it was, exactly where it was. So what was the distance from the bottom of the window to where the bullet hole was? I can't answer that question accurately right now without referring to reports or photographs or other lab result type things. Do you have those with you? No. Are you fucking kidding me? No. Okay, so what was the distance from the bottom of the window to the roadway or the alleyway where a person would stand if they were going to, for example, shoot through the window? To the best of my recollection, the bottom of the window to the alleyway was approximately waist high. Whose waist? My waist, and the waist of the other investigators that was out there assisting and taking photographs. Which is how many inches? How many inches? Yeah, I can't tell you that. So there was some testimony about, and you sat here and watched a video, right? And you, right, what? Yeah, what the fuck? And you saw the questions by Marty Ryan about how he shot through the window, Dr. Moore, right? Yes. And he said, was it here at the waist or was it up here at the shoulder, right? Yes. And do you remember how he answered? Yes. Or he says no. Oh, so you sit here and you don't even know what you claim someone would have alleged? All I remember, committed murder. Your Honor, I'm going to object. How they committed that murder, I'm going to object. It's argumentative. Sustained. You don't know how he did it? Objection. Asked and answered. Well, that's a different question. How he did it, if the witness can respond. As I recall, he said, what difference does it make, or words to that effect? Okay, well, does it make a difference to your investigation? No. This is insane, you guys. Listen to this part. So if a person who confessed to a crime gives you information that is contradicted by the actual physical evidence, does that make no difference to your investigation? And then Hall says, objection hypothetical, not in evidence, not bullshit, overruled. I'll allow it. Thank you. Says after he gets fucking overruled. Thank you. In my opinion, listen to this. This is Van Leuven. This is who the fuck we're dealing with. In my opinion, whether he was shooting with his arm outstretched or whether his elbow was bent would have made a difference in the situation. Wouldn't have. Okay, well, let's talk about what you also testified about, which was the trajectory. Remember, we got into that and whether you were qualified to even talk about that. This guy just says, in my opinion, whether he was shooting with his arm outstretched or whether his elbow was bent wouldn't have made a difference in the situation. Basically, your confession, if it doesn't match the evidence, it doesn't matter. And you said that the trajectory was downward. Is that right? Correct. So did you take measurements of where, obviously we have the autopsy report and evidence, and where their measurements as to where the gunshot wound was in relation to where, the height of Dr. Drake, if he's sitting or if he's standing. The injuries to Dr. Drake were consistent with him sitting on the stool in front of the window, leaning forward. And so if you're measuring from the stool to his gunshot wound, how many inches was that? I can't tell you that right now. And what was the, from where he was sitting and where he was shot, did you measure to figure, and what was the, from where he was sitting and where he was shot, did you measure to figure out what level in the window that the gunshot would have had to come through to hit him at the location? That information, again, is all recorded in the electronic scans that were done. So that information is available to you, but I can't tell you that off the top of my head today. Okay. But you seem to be really confident that it was a downward trajectory. It was. Okay. So you said that the person, it doesn't matter if they're standing up or if they're down here at their hip. Does that make a difference in terms of what the trajectory of the bullet is? Certainly. What the fuck is Jill doing, man? How about this? Hi, Detective Van Leuven. How did you determine that there was this gunshot at 726? That's what Jennifer Drake said. Okay, and what did you do to determine that that's true? Like, what the fuck? And then where's Mick Millett, the alibi witness? So do you typically, if you have you're familiar with guns, right? You use firearms all the time. I am. Why didn't you print any of these exhibits out, Jill, and show him what the fucking scene looked like? Where's the goddamn ME? And that's part of the extensive training and experience, right? Sure. So if somebody has a gun at their hip and they're shooting straight, how's that going to have a downward trajectory? If they're shooting straight, it wouldn't have a downward trajectory. Okay. So they'd have to maybe be standing up and pointing down. Not right. Not necessarily, ma'am. How would you get a downward trajectory unless you're pointing the gun down? Well, you could have your arm straight and have it tilted down. Listen to this fucking fuck. Van Leuven just said literally 2 pages ago that it does not matter if your arm is bent down or anything like that. Now, he says, well, how would you get it? Well, you could have your arm straight and have it tilted down. Oh, okay. So arm straight, turn, tilt. Or arm straight with your arm down, right. Or arm straight with your wrist tilted down, arm so, yep. Right. So with the evidence, though, from the confession that you got from Dr. Moore, you said it didn't really matter. And you didn't remember what he said about how he shot. But did you take any measurements of Dr. Moore? So see how high he would be from the window at the time of the shooting? No. And whether it would be a difference if he said he held it at the waist or whether he held it straight out or whether he held his hand down? Or how about whether or not the fucking window was even shut out from the outside, Jill? You didn't even go to that yet? Are you going to get to that part? Then how did he determine the shot came from outside in? Can you? Like, this is. If you think that this defense attorney was prepared for a preliminary hearing, I'm sorry, like, I don't. Not in the slightest. Again, the trajectory of the bullet. I'm sorry, question. And whether it be different. And whether it would be a difference if he said he held it. Again, the trajectory of the bullet through the window and through the shade was consistent with an adult person firing from outside the window standing on the pavement. An adult person of what size? Of average size, an average male. That sounds a little bit like speculation. Okay. Did you do any measurements to confirm any of your idea of what an average person would do in a shooting a firearm like this? Your Honor, I'm going to object to the relevancy at this time and also beyond the scope. The only thing that we talked about was the downward trajectory from the window through the blinds that were there, not the actual shooter and the position that the shooter was. So is beyond the scope of the direct examination, Ms. Bolton. I don't know that it is beyond this scope. We're trying to understand what, his testifying that this is what happened. And this evidence that he has put him at the scene and he did all this careful investigation. No, you haven't gotten to any of that. You didn't get to the careful investigation. And it looks like he didn't even know how these things happened. And it's relevant. It's called impeachment. Then you call your witnesses to impeach him, Jill. I'm going to allow you, but I'll ask you to try to make it concise so we can move on to the next topic. Certainly. So you want to impeach him when? I think you've done a little bit of the impeachment with like, okay, that it doesn't matter, but then he's telling you it has to be tilted and whatnot. But why wouldn't you just call Sally Ann Aiken and she testifies that it wasn't a downward trajectory, that it was an upward trajectory, and then it just gets blown the fuck out? Why wasn't Sally Ann Aiken there? The damn medical, the person that did the autopsy. So before we can kind of finalize on the trajectory issue, did you compare? You said you made measurements to determine this downward trajectory, right? We did two different things. One is a crude way. We inserted a rod, a ballistics rod, through the center of the holes in the window as well as the blind, and then took photographs of showing the downward trajectory angle of the rod. So it's visible in the photographs so that any person can look at that and see that it was a downward angle, and not just a downward angle, but also an angle. I believe from left to right as it went in the window. And then we measured with a tape measure where those holes were, both inside and outside. And again, I say that was crude measurement, but you never know what may be useful later. The more precise measurements were done using a laser scanner system that Coeur d'Alene did. And that was so later on if it was important for court purposes. Gotcha. You or anyone else would be able to look where things were and how high they were and all that. Did you and when you kind of came to these conclusions about the downward trajectory, did it make a difference for example, what Sally Aiken, the pathologist, said about what direction she saw the bullet go based on where it landed in his body? Well, I didn't obviously know that information until later. Excuse me? That's a lie. So I knew that the bullet had entered the building on a downward trajectory, as you say, when I saw the building. And it wasn't just me. There were other experienced detectives there also that were all seeing the same thing. No, they weren't. And we were conferring and coming to the same conclusions. Once we got the autopsy report back and we saw where the entrance wound was and where the bullet ended up, then as commonly done, we got to see how that lines up with the hole of the bullet coming into the building. In looking at, why did you stop him? In looking at, what did you find? Well, in looking at those things, the only thing that made sense was that was sitting on the stool that was directly in front of the window and that he was leaning forward. So doesn't make sense. Okay, so you have to make a lot of assumptions. I'm not sure I take your meaning by making assumptions. Well, according to the way the bullet hole was entering the body, it went from a lower rib to an upper rib, right? Right. So if I may, so from a lower rib to an upper rib would be an upward direction, right? Right. So he's leaning forward like this. That's the trajectory line up, and then that's the only way that makes sense. He's leaning forward like what? Like leaning over his desk. It's still, that means somebody's shooting up like this. So what are you talking about? Okay, and did you collaborate with Dr. Aiken about that? No. Okay. Let's talk about some other things that happened in your investigation. Actually, the night of the shooting, there were some eyewitnesses that had made some. One of them made a 911 call, and another one, the young man and his girlfriend both. Wait a second. I gotta go. Peace out, Girl Scouts. Holy shit. I gotta go.